Hello, and welcome to the Shifting Culture podcast, in which we have conversations about the culture we create and the impact we can make. I'm your host, Joshua Johnson. You can go to shiftingculturepodcast.com to interact or donate. If you're really enjoying this podcast, please let others know about it and go to Apple Podcasts and leave a rating or review. That will really help others be able to find this podcast. Well, today we have a great episode with John Arndt. John is a coach and spiritual director and a friend. And in this conversation, he helps us all figure out our posture in our interactions with others and how we can attend to the presence of Jesus as we are with others. It's a fantastic conversation. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. John Arndt, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm excited to have you here.
I am excited to pod here with you.
All right, let's
Is that
pod.
a verb? Do people use that?
I think some people do. I've never really liked it. You know, what is a pod,
weird.
Right? You're casting this pod out, and I just, what is it? I don't know.
It is strange, the etymology of podcast. I mean, Is it because people are normally in like soundproof booths and it's like they're in a pod while they're speaking to the world?
That's possible. It could be. I'm not entirely sure. But I was listening to a podcast the other day, and the host was like, "Welcome to the pod." I was like, that doesn't work. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I don't
let's
like
not do
that.
Okay, I take it back. I'm excited to podcast here with you today.
Whatever that means. That's good. As I look at you, and you've started to walk with a lot of people in coaching, spiritual direction, helping people find their calling. What are some of the principles, the things that you have found that really help people authentically live out their faith with Jesus in any sphere that they walk into?
Wow. Just going for the jugular right at the beginning.
Am going for the jugular. I was like, let's just jump in.
I love it. I think I'm to quote our mutual friend Liam Burns, to the man with a hammer in his hand, everything looks like a nail.
Yeah.
I feel like I just finished rereading Henry Nouwen's The Wounded Healer, and was just impressed again with his articulation of we're usually responding to the world's needs and God's direction out of a place where we've been wounded or have spent time in suffering in. And I feel like so this has been in my head lately, this idea of what does that mean? I think I grew up with an amazing family, but because of my own issues, I felt like I wasn't given enough space to really be me. Not because of boundaries that the world, that my family's put on me, but just in interior journey. And so I'm backing way up here. You started with a great question, but I'm backing way up.
No, that's good.
I feel like this trajectory is helpful for people. I feel as though, I was reflecting recently on who growing up spoke to those wounds and needs that I had as a teenager and kind of growing as a Christian man. And I don't think anyone did. I don't think anyone asked me about my family system and asked me about how is my relationship with the Lord affected by my relationship with my siblings or my sense of identity. I think it was just sort of, there was so much emphasis being placed on personal responsibility, individual salvation by individual and personal relationship with Jesus, which is awesome. But it also
you find
that,
as you walk that out later on in life, did you find a difference between American Christianity and people asking those individual questions, and then as you went to South Africa and entered into the rest of the world, did they ask different types of questions and think about community and family differently in their spiritual journey?
I would say that they maybe didn't maybe ask the kinds of questions that, it wasn't that they facilitated a discipleship process that helped me better.
Yeah.
I think it was that they started off with a different premise. And so I had to adjust and realize my way of thinking, where I'm the center of everything, is pretty American individualized.
Yep.
So to unravel that and go, I'm born into a family, and all these scriptures are written like to a church, and most of the use that Paul uses are plural, and like all of that stuff I had to catch up with like way later. And I don't think that there was a lot of people in South Africa or other nations I dealt with, Swiss, Germany, French, and there's so many nationalities I was engaging with. I don't think that they were necessarily provoking me as much as they were living a different idea of what it means to be a follower of Jesus in the family. So you go, oh, like this Xhosa and Zulu people are living from the values of Ubuntu. I am because we are. I grew up, with Descartes. I am because they're, because I think therefore I am. It's all about me and what happens in my head. And they're like, it's all here, like because of family, because of tribe, because of community. And so I think, so I would just say, I don't know that it was that I was provoked like by specific questions or someone trying to help shape my thoughts on that in those cultures. It was more watching them embody a familial expression of faith and expression of life, and realizing, man, I get annoyed if I make an hour appointment with someone and it's an hour and 10 and I've got to go do other things. I'm American. Like, I've got things on my plate. And they're like, hey, we said we'd hang out today. So in their head, that's like, let's hang out as long as the day is long. Like we're going to be, and so just like that kind of collision of culture where you go to someone's house for a barbecue as an American, you're like, okay, I got 2 hours in me. And in South Africa, they're like, this will be a 10-hour experience, there's no time frame, there's no limit to that. We're just community together. So I think that collision really forced me to deal with some stuff.
Let's go back as you're growing up and you're speaking, having people speak into your life. And you're talking about the wounded warrior, that they weren't speaking into your wounds or the places that you were yearning for.
I think it was, I think what stands out to me is that people often are just assuming that everyone around you, like, it's between you and the Lord, and maybe I can insert some data, I can insert some thoughts that will help you learn and grow and get better with what you're doing on the inside of you. And it's almost like plugging money into, the image that I have in my mind is almost plugging money into a jukebox. Like, I'm going to add something in there and then it's going to go well for you because you're going to follow my advice. You're going to do this. And so my problems, I had a lot of behavioral issues, not a lot, but a fair amount growing up. And they weren't wounds that were explored in Christian community. They were problems that I had with authority, or problems that I had with my behavior. And so that, automatically instead of it being an area that I might've been wounded in and was reacting out of, it was wrong behavior that is attached to my identity. And so I spent most of my life not realizing that was what's happening inside of me. And then after some really chaotic years in university and in college, I went and met with this person in Kansas City. Can't remember his name. I want to say it was Marcus something, but he did a ministry called Theophostic Prayer. And it was
Marcus.
Marcus.
He is now on our pastoral care team at All Nations Kansas
amazing.
City. So yes, I do know Marcus. He's amazing.
So I sat in his office, and I want to say it was like kind of close to Lee's Summit, somewhere around there. But I sat very wounded, very afraid of what God would bring up about the bad choices. All I was told is this ministry was like, he would ask a question, and then we'd both be quiet, and we'd see what God would bring up on the inside of me, and I would respond out of that. And so I'm like, just kind of nervous. I'm like, well, first of all, what if God doesn't say anything?
Yeah.
And then second, like, what if, like, do I really want to sit with the stranger and just have God bring up all the worst parts of me, and I have to just talk about it? So I sat down, and in the first session, he just said, "You seem nervous." I was like, "Yeah, I am." He said, "What are you nervous about?" And I said, "Well, I mean, what if God doesn't say anything? Are we just going to sit here and look at each other?" And he said, "Let's ask God about that. Why don't you, like, Lord, what will happen if you don't say anything to John?" And we got quiet, and immediately some things were happening on the inside. And from that moment on, for, I don't even know how often we met. It was probably 6 or 7 times, but it was just such a gentle, helpful way to help me interact with the Lord, use, in this safe space where this very gentle, mild-mannered, I assume he's like this because this is what he was like in our session.
That's exactly what he's like.
Just gentle, mild-mannered, pastorally oriented person, did not try to fix me, did not express shock at any of the things I talked about, did not try to, when I would say something like, "Well, my sister's the apple of my father's eye," he wouldn't be like, "Well, you know what the Bible says." Like, he didn't try to rush in to, like, correct theology.
Yeah.
He would just gently ask me to interact with the Lord about what I was saying. And it was amazing. And so, even now, I guess this is probably 18 years after this point with him, maybe 15, 18 years. I feel like so much of the ways that I'm interacting with people are through the lens of, how do I help people have space in which they can reflect on what they're feeling and thinking, and then are getting a chance to process with the Lord about that places where they've been wounded, and not rush to go, "Oh, we got to heal them." Like, that's the impulse, is the American microwave generation. You got a problem, let's fix it. Like, okay, yeah, but, like, also, what is your suffering teaching about you and about yourself, and what does it mean about the world you're in? And so to me, I feel like, I don't quite remember the exact wording of your original question, but but my response to whatever beautiful question that was is,
it was a good one,
like,
John.
the approach that I feel like this approach that I have been engaging in with spiritual direction and coaching is really rooted in what transformed me in those moments with Marcus. And and I started in a vacuum while I was living in South Africa. There was all these missionaries in the field who these workers were in really difficult spaces in difficult countries, difficult cultural assimilation stuff going on, team conflict, family meltdown, all this stuff, vision, tension around vision and mission and purpose. And I realized they didn't need my advice. They didn't need my strategy, which I love to offer both to anyone who wants it, whether they care to or not. I just realized they just need someone asking questions that will help them process stuff. So that, I feel like it was out of that woundedness that God met me in through Marcus that really led me to where I am today.
If you're thinking of, like, what do missionaries need? They don't need more tasks in front of them. They don't need more strategy. They don't need more vision. They're going after it. I mean, they're apostolic by nature. They're going to go and they're going to, like, establish something very quickly, do the work. They're workers. They need to learn how to be and to be with Jesus. Are there any helpful strategies that you've found or ways that we can learn how to be with Jesus in the everyday, and not, as opposed to working for Jesus, which seems totally different to me? The two ways of doing life with Jesus, that seems different, and one doesn't seem as helpful than the other, in my opinion.
I feel like a lot of us put the cart before the horse, where we feel the call, we feel a sense to go, we get trained, we learn strategies, we find theology and praxology that orients us and finds the right framework, and then we go, and then we realize there's nothing sustaining us in this. And so as far as what I would say, I mean, I think I'll mention 2 books that I think are super helpful as a way of training. I think David Fitch's Faithful Presence, 7 Habits That Shape the Church for Mission is super awesome, because he's exploring all these different habits for churches that help them be healthy. But at the root of it is attending to the presence of Jesus in different situations. It's not, how can I be better at sharing the gospel or holding a church service. The goal is not excellence in that. The goal is attending to the presence of God with you, and not just you individually, but as a group. And I think that was a monumental paradigm shift for me to realize, especially going from the missional world of like trying to start house churches in the, the Arab world, in Africa and Asia, and then moving back to the States to go, what does it look like here? He was one of the few people I've read that I was truly inspired to go, wow, the types of things his church is living out, I think really land well in this culture. And they're all centered around presence, which is helpful theology. It's not, can we do more for the Lord? It's, let's attend to his presence. Let's orient ourselves towards this person. And in that then flows, and that's when the cart gets moved back into the proper position. Like we're supposed to do, we're supposed to work, we're supposed to be obedient, but it's supposed to be like out of the overflow and outflow of who Jesus is, not in our relationship with him. So I feel like that book was really helpful. Another one that I think is awesome, especially for maybe burgeoning missionaries, workers, pastors. It was written kind of to like university students of mine, Sky Jathani's With. He just unpacks our posture with the Lord. So he talks about 4 unhelpful paradigms that, and you just, as you're reading it, you're like, oh man, I engage in these every day. Like working for God so that he doesn't get mad at me, or looking to the Bible just to find awesome principles to build your life on and leaving Jesus in the dust. So he just kind of provokes that and goes, what does it truly mean to live with the Lord? And which is the heart of the gospel, is that God put on skin and like templed with us. Like he brought presence to us, and then was like, hey, this is awesome. I'm a king. I'm here on earth. But more than that, I actually think this is so much better if I actually go and send my spirit so that every living person has the opportunity to abide with me and be filled by presence. So I feel like that book, both of those books from very different angles, just kind of point your idea towards what does it mean to be with Jesus. And I feel like there's other practices that I would probably mention besides those 2 books as resources. I feel as though using Lectio Divina, people can Google that and kind of see how to do that, but it's just basically divine reading. You read a passage of scripture and you're just wanting to fill your imagination with what's going on in the moment. So looking at a moment where Jesus is interacting with disciples, and instead of just leaving that as scriptures that are like helpful to guide our actions today, to actually try to tend the presence of Jesus in that moment as we read about his life, to go, when Jesus walks up to the scene where Lazarus is dead and Mary and Martha are grieving, like what was he experiencing? What was happening to him? As they each came out and both told him, Lord, where were you? You could have prevented this. What did he feel? What was he experiencing? What were his disciples feeling, knowing that he delayed and watching his best friends be grieved? So I feel like tapping into kind of the humanity of God in Jesus is really helpful to help us abide, because we usually turn to scriptures for either like, I got to memorize things to protect me or bless me, or we look at it as awesome principles to discern new strategies of touching other people's lives or fixing my children or whatever. And often we miss the person that the pages are describing. And so I feel like Lectio Divina, just the way of like chewing the fat on an interaction that Jesus, the person, has with someone, transforms. I think that act alone, if everyone listening to the podcast just chose one parable, or not even a parable, but one moment where Jesus is interacting with the blind beggar or the man at Bethsaida who's sick, or the guy who is lowered in town, and then just read that every day for 20 days and just said, God, show me who you are in this passage. And spent time throughout the day returning to it in the middle of their work, making a meal with their family, talking about it with their children. I guarantee you their life would change because they would be just seeing the presence of Jesus. So I feel like that would be a bit, that would be another encouragement.
I think that's a great encouragement. I mean, Lectio Divina has been really helpful, and a practice that I have done, and I have done in community as well. As you're looking at facilitating presence, being attuned to the presence of Jesus, what is the purpose of doing it with others and in community, as opposed to just being aware of it individually?
It's an awesome question. Thank you. I mean, I think that there's a danger if we're only reading scripture in individual settings, that we only find what we want and need, right? My brother in a high school band, a high school pop band, they wrote a song called Cafeteria Jesus. And it's just, the whole thing is just like, I like you're walking up to a buffet, like I like this, but I don't like that. I'm just going to choose one thing. We want to be immersed in a community that holds up the foods of Cafeteria Jesus that we don't like, and help us reflect what's happening, what's going on in me that makes me not want to look at this interaction Jesus had with someone. So there's something different happens to us when we're in community and experiencing the presence of Jesus in the scriptures. When we zoom out, everyone knows, no matter what kind of faith background you come from, whether it's Anglican, charismaniac, or anywhere in between, everyone knows that when you're praying, the dynamics are radically different if you're by yourself with one person or with 100. And so I like to think that there's something happening in not only in attending to the presence of God in prayer that we need corporately as well as individually, but also the same with reading the scripture and like that points to this living person, this God who loves us and has put on flesh and reveals the heart of the Father to us. We need community to experience that with us, just like we need community to experience prayer or experience outreach. I mean, there's a reason why, and in David Fitch's book, he kind of gets a little bit more into there's a reason why we're meant to hold these spaces differently. So he talks about our Sunday gathering is a type of place where we're hosted by the presence of God. We gather around communion and worship like he's the one kind of holding it. But if we're loving our neighbors, we're hosting that space and we're inviting them into our backyards and living rooms and around the table with the Lord. And we're doing something, differently in that space. And then very different from outreach, where God and us are being hosted by the people we're meeting. And so in those three spaces, we relate to people differently as opposed to how we or they are hosting us. And I think that, there's a lot to unpack just in that simple, thing, but it does point to, okay, so if we're going to attend the presence of God, we need multiple people. I wonder for you, I know that, you like to probably ask all the questions on the podcast, but I'm just curious, like, when
I wanted to get to a place where you're asking me questions. So this is great.
when you are considering how you engage with people in discipleship, whether they're a believer or maybe they haven't met Jesus yet and they haven't started following Jesus yet, what's it like for you if it's you by yourself or you're with other people? How does that difference affect you?
If it's me by myself with one other person,
Mm-hmm.
if it's or me with a group of people and another person that trying to engage Jesus, is
Yeah,
that
totally.
okay?
Yeah.
Me by myself. I mean, I think I'm trying to get to a place of helping somebody discern the place that Jesus is already present with them in the midst of whatever they're going through, whatever their circumstance is, that Jesus is truly good news for whatever they're going through. So if I'm here by myself, the one thing is I'm doing some very attentive listening, asking specific questions to get to who this person is that I'm talking to, what they're going through, and how Jesus can encounter them and have an experiential practice with them. And in the midst of listening intently and trying to get to that, I'm trying to have a dialogue with Holy Spirit, asking Holy Spirit if there's anything that He wants to say. That's a lot harder if I'm by myself than it is if I have other people. So, for example, if I sat in a living room of a Syrian refugee that I've done, so it was my wife and I and another couple that go and is talking to this family. What often happened was, as my wife and I are engaging and having a conversation with this family and talking through those things and those issues, this other couple is praying and asking Holy Spirit, is there anything that you have for this family? And I could tell you every single time that we want to visit with this, and I'm thinking of a specific couple that we went out with, every single time they had something very specific from the Holy Spirit for a family. And I think every time we went on visit, it ended in tears from the person that we're talking to. And it was tears, it was good tears that, Jesus is encountering them in a very specific way and He wants to speak. And I think that only was accessible and was only able to happen because we had more than just one person in the room, and there was multiple people that were attending to the presence of Jesus in the midst of that room and that experience and that conversation.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a beautiful description, right? Of
Yeah,
what is the power in community attending to the presence. It's not all on you. And like you described, you've got the agenda of the other person talking, you've got how you respond to it,
yeah,
how you track with it, and then you're thinking, I would love to encourage them. I'd love to point them towards God in some way. I'd love to see their posture, if it's not already open, like what can I say or do that would move them towards that? And so it's like you're having two things happen in your head at all times.
yeah,
How do I respond to their agenda, and how do I maybe facilitate and move this? And God, what are you saying? What are you doing? How are you already present in this moment? What's happening?
yeah.
And that can be really hard.
Mm-hmm.
The I don't know too many people who do that well. I mean,
Yeah. One of the things that for you, you're very good at pulling out what's already present and already there. And I think a lot of people like speak it, like say God is present, He's doing something, instead of asking questions that would pull out the awareness of His presence in the moment, which I think is more powerful for the person that you're engaging with. How would you go about doing something like that in a conversation?
um, I think one helpful practice is to always try to take a step back to get wider perspective. So if I meet someone at the grocery store and they're sharing about their family, and maybe someone has COVID and they're nervous, you might stumble into a conversation. It can be easy to kind of just reflect back. What do I know?
Yep.
So, my uncle got COVID, or yes, I know that fear. I have a son who hasn't been vaccinated. So I know. So it could be easy to reflect back. What do we know? But I think there's something where you can kind of engage with kind of holy curiosity to go, what else is going on? And so, so in those moments, it can be easy to reflect back when someone's describing some anxiety they have, a family member has COVID. Wow, you really care for family. Like family means a lot to you. And that's not even a question, but just the mirroring back of hearing their desire gives them a chance to go, yeah, I do. Wow, I really care about family. And I'm experiencing stress and fear and anxiety around what's happening here. It helps you tap into people's desire a bit. And so it's not just that I have to have the agenda that I bring to the moment, but I can help them unpack what is bubbling under the surface, where they want to talk about something, but they don't know how to get there. They don't have thoughtful moments with people that help them get there. So I feel like mirroring back what you're hearing often helps people. I feel like having holy curiosity, not to satisfy my itch to know more about them, but to go, what is it like to live in a pandemic where you care about family and you don't get to see them very often? So all of a sudden I put it back into their shoes to say, tell me more about what you love and how hard that is. And then they get to open up, and you get the chance to minister to that pain and that frustration and that hope for more. And then you get to add your hope to them. I hope you get to experience your family in deeper ways. I hope that and so all of a sudden the conversation can shift from someone sharing something about their circumstance and me trying to relate to it. I've stopped trying that very much. I mean, I still do sometimes, but I try to shift towards help them get more perspective about what they're seeing, thinking, and feeling.
That's so helpful in the midst of a place where we're at in America at the moment, where we're so polarized, and it's more about, trying to get your own viewpoint across, and like everybody is a nail because we have a hammer and we're trying to hammer everything in to other people. And nobody's going to listen. Nobody listens to each other. And now it just is noise, right? So it's such a helpful thing to strip away the noise, to get to the heart of what is happening in the moment, so that we could have a fruitful conversation and not just a conversation that's at odds and everybody's afraid to engage from the beginning.
Yeah. Yes, it is really helpful. I think the hard part is that most of us have a pressure. Most of us sense an inner pressure we place on ourselves to correct people who believe the wrong things. And so whether it's politically or religiously, or maybe about how they're raising their children, or what choices they make about school, it doesn't have to be just politics or religion, but most of us will feel responsible. If I hear you say something that I disagree with, most of us have this pressure that makes us want to correct, or at least go, maybe I won't correct you and teach you something in this moment, but at least I'll let you know I don't agree. At least I'll let you know that there's something wrong with that. And it relieves an internal pressure when we say that, right? So part of what I'm suggesting in this approach is you actually have to do some work to hold that space where I could hear I have conversations with friends that don't believe the same things, that
Yep.
don't believe in God, that have been wounded or by church, or might even have really intense emotions like hatred
Yep.
towards structures like church. And so I've had to be able to hold space where I can hear the strong emotions around an institution that I'm often associated with, and not react defensively, because I hold that space to go, it's not about me and my relationship to church. They're talking about how they feel. And so to help in that moment, to give them space to share and talk, and to refuse to allow myself to chime in on what I believe or feel or think, on their issue. It does take work. Like it is exercising a muscle to go, okay, I'm not going to respond or react. I'm going to instead hear you out. I'm going to allow you. In fact, I'm not just going to listen to you. I'm going to ask you more questions to get at the desire. Because I guarantee you, my friends that have had those experiences care just as much about loving their neighbor as my friends who go to church. But they have experienced a type of church where that feels like hypocrisy, or that feels like, abuse, or whatever it is. But they might have some of the same desires that Jesus not only displayed in his life, but calls us to live out. And so for me, to not allow myself to defend the institution, but hold the space, hear them out, affirm the desire. Man, you love family. You don't need a religious family to tell you how to love. That's awesome. And then the more I do that, the more space there is for me to share about my own beliefs. But I don't have to lead the way with it. I can let them, if that makes sense,
Do you think
give someone space.
That this inner pressure that we feel to correct one another, to be right, and that's our pressure, is like we either know we're right, or we want to be right, we want to make sure other people are right and have correct thinking. As Adam and Eve went to the knowledge of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, that seems to me a place where, in that fall, that we now have the knowledge of good and evil, which I guess we weren't supposed to have. We take that and try to instill this correctness and this correct belief on other people. And do you think that is a product of the fall? And if so, what other ways can we go about going back to our original creation intent to walk with God in the garden in the evening?
Yeah, I think there's a lot about that story that I couldn't say I totally understand. But I will say I've heard some beautiful thoughts, especially from the Bible Project guys, around why the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and what they would describe as that it wasn't maybe that we weren't meant to know the difference, but that we weren't meant to define the difference for ourselves, and that we were meant to live out of God's description of what is good and evil. And so there was a relational reality to truth, which yeah, I mean, I think my instinct is to trace it back to this story that tells us so much about the roots of human behavior. When I think about vulnerability, I think that's the opposite of what's happening in defensiveness, right? When I'm defensive and I want to tell you what's right or wrong, or I want to, often in those moments, I'm retreating into a belief system, what I think about things. And so immediately in that moment, I'm less concerned with my physical body. I might be physically aggressive. I might get ramped up.
Right.
I'm retreating away from my physical body and probably emotional reality. What's my tone? What kinds of words am I using? How am I picking up on how you're hearing what I'm saying? I'm probably retreating from those, and I'm retreating into my thoughts towards how I think about these things. because I'm threatened in that
Right.
moment. I'm
Yep.
threatened with the idea that I might let you walk away from me with false thinking, and I'm on the line for that. I'm going to be held accountable to that. So
Yep.
it's my responsibility if I interact with you and you say something I don't agree with, for me to change your mind. And so I think that's a lot of it is I'm retreating away from vulnerability in that moment, and I'm doubling down on really a Greek Platonic way of sharing the gospel, which is ideas are the most important thing here.
Yeah.
And truth is the most important thing. Some truth that's on the outside of you and me that I can cling to and say, you need to believe this, is actually the most important thing here. And Jesus has a different definition of truth because he calls himself the truth. He's not an abstract idea. He's a person. He's the embodiment of God and man together. And so he would draw our attention away from a principle that I say is more important than the way you and I are relating. He would actually he would say that you're not actually loving your enemy. You're not living love in that moment.
Yep.
You're hiding behind lofty ideas. And so I feel like my short answer would be, in those defensive moments where I'm feeling like I need to show you that I'm right, is usually there's an underlying thing happening where I'm nervous about being wrong and failing, about, there's something else happening about me, and I'm reacting out of that. When I lean into the vulnerability of, tell me more of what you feel, and I'm going to hold on to what I think about it. When I lean into that, and maybe I even admit I don't have all the answers, I don't know everything. If I lean into vulnerability, usually what's happening is there's more of the embodiment of who I am in this moment, not just a thought, but who I am, how I react to you, how I'm listening to you, how I'm responding to your physical and emotional and spiritual presence in this moment. And usually it's out of that place where truth is really discovered, where there's a discovery experience, rather than, I'm going to use a harsh word, a colonization of an idea, where I say, this is the idea, you got to accept it, even if you don't like it.
Yeah. So I think what I hear you say is that we should, instead of taking right thinking, correct thinking, and try to instill that in to other people, we want to facilitate people towards Jesus, who is the truth. And in that relationship with him and others, truth is revealed.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if we look at Jesus as an example, the ones that he often was kind of calling out for wrong thinking was pretty much Pharisees. And usually it's not wrong thinking, it was wrong behavior. It was how they were relating to the people around them unhealthily, how they were relating to God. I think when you look at Jesus, there was I heard Floyd quote this a lot, Floyd McClung. I don't know if it was his saying. He is probably a great borrower of sayings,
as we all are.
I remember he often would say, belonging before belief. Is that what he would say? Belonging before belief. I think so. And his idea was, as you extend a loving approach to others, as you are helping someone know that they belong with you and they belong to the family you're inviting them into. Yeah, you belong here. And not insisting that they, I think Dallas Willard said this, or maybe it was, I think it was Dallas, where he was talking about what a faulty presentation of the gospel to say to someone, you need to believe what I believe, whether you believe it or not. Like, here's the checklist, just say you believe it. Like, that doesn't, how is that life and freedom, right? But to tell someone they belong and then allow the fruit of their relationship with the living God to produce new character, new beliefs, and new ideas, new right thinking, that seems like sort of the path forward, right? To invite people into family that then says, hey, this is who we are as a family. And that's how you have a son, like, this is how you do it, right?
Yep.
You don't go, Luke, you should know by now that, I don't care how old you are, like, you should know that we are always speak honoringly of, like, it's a gradual, hey, you belong here. And guess what? In our family system, we
Yeah.
honor guests. So we let them eat first. Like, you help them catch up to the family system, right?
Yeah.
So I
I
think
mean, I
that's
think
more of the
Luke
approach.
is caught up. I mean, when we pray at night and we're praying for our family, he also has us pray for anybody that has been a guest in our home, because they're also family, because they've been in our house. They've been in our home together with our family. So I think it's already been caught. I never taught him that hey, guests are our
That's
family.
awesome.
They're part of us and they belong. But that's what he thinks and believes, and I think it's through, an experience with us. And as we embody that ourselves, as Meredith and I embody that, Luke starts to live it out himself as well. And I think whatever we embody, others around us will start to live that. I just have a question about Bethany, your wife, as she went from being a very vibrant, upfront ministry leader to then, being sick and having to stay home, and because she was, fatigued and tired, exhausted, and being relegated to a, back of the house ministry of prayer
Yeah.
and engaging that. How did walking that journey for you affect your relationship with God?
I mean, wow, that was a really big one. I
I
mean, I
know. That's
think,
why I was like, well, maybe we don't want to get in that deep, but
no, I'm
it's
happy
an
to.
interesting question to me.
I'll be happy to talk about me. I don't feel comfortable talking about her relationship with the Lord
Yep.
because she's such a great communicator. I'll let her tell her story.
Yep.
But for me, yeah, it was huge. I mean, in the first year of our marriage, she deals with chronic pain, and I had to learn in the first year of marriage that how do I live in a natural state where I'm empathetic and caring and nurturing her in her need, and yet not allowing my emotional experience of the day to be in tandem with what she's going through. So how do I live where I can care, and yet I'm also free to have my own? So individuate, but also identify. And that was huge. And that, I think, set me on a road for the long haul. This in just a couple of weeks, we'll celebrate 10 years of marriage. And it's been a lot, since 2014, it became really difficult for her to engage in ministry and public life in lots of ways. And so I feel as though I was in a unique position where I'm not suffering the pain, and yet I'm experiencing as a partner and as a spouse and as a, her, I love her. And so how does that affect me? And it's affected me in lots of ways. And I think having a healthier theology of suffering was a big deal for me. And I think somewhere around 2011 or 12, a couple of years into marriage, I began piecing together the tension of living where I expect and hope for spontaneous physical healing. I grew up as a charismaniac, so this is in my DNA. I meet someone and they're hurt. I'm gonna, hey, I know God loves to heal today. I've seen it. I remember praying for someone in Malawi in 2011 who had yellow fever, and then the next morning she was healed, and she told her village about it. So I've experienced this, and yet to live with, so that moment where I live each day as if Bethany can be healed, and then live with the reality where she wasn't yet today. So in that tension, I don't think it can not form someone. So I don't think it could not affect my relationship with the Lord. So I feel like it probably helped me produce more compassion for others around me who are living in their own experiences of longing and waiting. I think it helped me relate to God in more of a complex way, where it's not just binary. He doesn't heal or he heals, but okay, there's some other things I don't understand here. Just like with anyone, there's behavior you experience that you're like, it doesn't totally sync up with what I would expect you to do. So what I do with that. So I think it deepened my experience with the Lord. It really rooted me. There's really nothing like feeling helpless that roots you in the love of the Lord. I mean, I think that's why the Lord gave us these attachment experiences as children. Like Luke gazes up into Meredith's eyes and forms an attachment that gives him that sense of security and safety where he can explore, but he always knows mom's got my corner. I can always walk back in the room and she's right there. So when that happens to the Lord, where we attach to the Lord and gaze into his face and we experience him in our hearts and in the arms and hugs and love of the community around us, when that happens, we're rooted even in our helpless infant stages. And that does something to us. It gives us security. It gives us, it tells us there's something that's valuable about us, even if we can't change the situation we're in. And so I feel like that being rooted in his love and attached to him in the helplessness of not being able to change her position, I think it really gave me some deep roots where, I was in a missional culture that really was excited about outreach. And I would actively resist, not the explicit invitation of the people around me, but the implicit expectations that like we spend 8 hours of our day out there in the community doing this, when I felt like actually God's calling me to care for the people doing that. And even though it was valuable to the people around me, it wasn't championed. And so what is it like to live in a ministry that's necessary and that's called by God, but isn't championed in the same way that this other flashier ministry is? What does that mean? And I think to not let that wreak havoc on your identity, you got to be rooted, and you got to be able to withstand some of that expectation stuff that you have to deal with.
Well, that's beautiful, John. Thank you. So the two questions I like to ask at the end, number one, if you could go back to your 21-year-old self, what advice would you give?
Invest in Apple.
Yes.
Something deeper than that, I think I would say trust your instincts and come out of your shell. I think I often am slower to voice my desire because I'm trying to make room for other people. And it's only probably been in the last several years that I've been able to embrace the call to love others well and create room for them, while also really articulating desire and living out of a place where I'm integral. There's integrity of who I am, and I can speak my desire and not have to be like a suffering martyr or something. And so I think I would just say trust your instincts and speak your desire more.
Yeah, that's really good. You mentioned a few books, but is there anything else that you've been reading or watching that you would recommend?
My gosh, that's stuck there. I just started this book, which I think is fantastic. It's called Into the Silent Land by Martin Laird. It's a guide to Christian practice of contemplation. It seems like he makes it, he's describing the abiding place and and the prayerful practices that can help us get rooted in the love of Jesus. And I think I've just started it, but I can tell I'm going to love it. So I'm going to go ahead and throw a shout out to that. I would say the one that's causing me to ask most questions right now is called Redeeming Sex by Deborah Hirsch, wife of Alan Hirsch, those crazy Australians. Just fantastic, provocative thinking around everything, desire, sex, gender, LGBTQ, all of that. She does an awesome way of speaking honoringly about other people's experiences, and yet kind of going back to what is Jesus doing and saying, and how are we meant to live out of our humanity and not just an idealized perfection that we imagine. So I think those are probably the couple things I'm reading at the moment. I did commit to reading Thurman's Jesus and the Disinherited over the last year. That's been one where I'll read a page and put it down for like a week because I just want to let it saturate. So it's been a slow moving process for me, but it's been good.
That's great.
I would say if anyone wants to work with what we would call poor or marginalized, they should probably read this, because he's writing a book. It's really written from the stage of like, hey, we've heard a lot of the gospel from the lips of people who were colonizers, or like their gospel kind of fit into their worldview because they had plenty and they have a voice in society. Yep. We need a gospel for, his famous phrase is, with men with their backs to the wall. Like they got nothing else. Yeah. Like they're kind of on, and so, yeah, it's good. It's really good.
Wow. I think that's so important that we hear from different voices, and that we're aware of where people are coming from and the voices that we are listening to and the voices that we are reading, and try to get a diversity of perspectives. And I think only when we get a diversity of perspectives can we actually find something that's healthy and whole. Because usually if we have one perspective, we're missing something. We just really missing something. So it's good. Really, really good. I remember, I'll just briefly, right before COVID, I went to New York and did some stuff with Alan Hirsch. And he brought a box of Deb's book, Redeeming Sex, to sell. He didn't bring any of his own books. He didn't do any of that. He was just promoting his wife and selling her books and making sure that he's getting his wife's book out there. So, which was really cool to see. That's that awesome. He was loving and championing his wife in the middle of whatever he was doing. So it was cool.
That's awesome. Okay, so because you mentioned different voices, I'll mention one other book I'm reading, which is called Exodus, and it's like, I'll have to look this up. I'll send you a message so you can post it with the podcast. But it's basically a perspective of the women of Exodus who are actually the saviors and redeemers. Have you heard of this book?
I think I've heard of it. I haven't read it, but
it's beautiful. It's the idea is Moses was not the first one who was really God's provision of deliverance. It was the midwives that we see as the archetype. It's beautiful. It's a great book.
That's awesome.
And on my reading list that I just added last night, it's not out yet. It comes out in 2 weeks, but it's called Abuelita's Theology. And it's these grandmothers in the Hispanic tradition who have embodied helpful theology that has shaped their culture and I'm excited to read that.
So do you read, John? I don't know. I don't know if you actually read.
I try to have time for it. It's getting harder and harder to protect time for it, but
it is.
I do love it.
If anybody wants to, as you heard John today, and if you've loved what he had to say, and his voice was soothing enough that you would want to engage with him in some spiritual direction or coaching, how could people find that?
Yeah, they can go to, I work with a network called Integer Network. We do lots of coaching and stuff. I also have a website, flourishdirection.com, that is just kind of my way of showing the world what I do.
Yeah.
So they can find emails to contact me on both of those, integrnetwork.com or flourishdirection.com.
Great. So, well, John, it was a pleasure. It was such a great conversation. The problem is, we have a limited amount of time. I could talk to you all day. It's just a great conversation. You're easy to talk to. So thank you so much for engaging and being on today.
Thanks, Josh. I really loved it. It was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the show today. If you're really enjoying the show, please don't forget to hit the follow button on your favorite podcast app. You could do it right now. Just hit that little plus. And then I would love it if you would leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. So you could go right now to the show and leave a star rating and review and let us know how you are enjoying the show. And find us on Facebook and Instagram. So if you want to connect, interact, I post a lot of quotes and different things that you could actually interact with the episodes and let me know how you are enjoying the show. If you feel inclined to donate, there is a support the show link in the show notes, and it would send you directly to a page where you could donate so that new episodes can be produced for your enjoyment. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have an incredible week.